Hello, and welcome to Spilling the Milk, the podcast where we talk about the ups and downs of feeding your baby. This is not a topic that gets talked about enough, and we're trying to change that. My guest today is Stacie, who I have known for over a decade. She had her daughter Eleanor in March 2020, just as the world was going into lockdown. We talk about some of the unique challenges that presented, as well as her journey with exclusive pumping and some of her tips for other moms who might find this the best solution for their family as well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there.
It's a good answer. So you had a baby like the day the pandemic was starting in the US, basically. Does that sound about right?
I was induced. I went in like the night before the hospital went like on serious shutdown. So my family was able to come up there and see her when she was born. But the next day, they shut the hospital down as we were being discharged pretty much.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad your family got to be there. So then when you went home, how were there, how was the whole experience?
It was pretty good. I mean, like we had a couple people come over the day that we got home from the hospital, and like my neighbor made us dinner and stuff. But after that, like we went on serious lockdown. Like we did not let anybody into our house at that point. So we were kind of on our own, I want to say for at least a good 2 to 3 months before we let anybody around. So that was a big bonding, learning experience, everything between me and Kaylin, and then of course with Eleanor. So it was overwhelming, but we got through it.
No, it would be, because I mean that's the advice to new moms is always like don't try to do it on your own. Ask for help. Have grandma come over. At least have people come over and do your dishes, do your laundry, and
Yep.
you couldn't do that.
I'm very thankful for Kaylin, and I think we have a good relationship where we just kind of rotated the chores around the house. And then food honestly was a big problem because all the restaurants shut down, and people weren't, people usually bring you food or order you pizza or something. Nobody was doing that. So we were cooking every single meal for 3 months, nonstop, every day, all day.
It is. It's the food that gets you. You're right. I didn't even think about that.
And, we're a pain in the butt because we're vegan. So I don't even know if anybody would have cooked us anything.
I think in normal circumstances people would have. Oh man, that's so true. How did breastfeeding start off?
So I did have a consultant come in the hospital and kind of work with me and help me. She latched well on one side, and the other side was kind of a struggle, but she kind of explained different techniques to use. So I kept working with it, and then Eleanor also had jaundice when she was born, so we were going to the pediatrician every day. And I kind of I want to say it was the second or third day, I just the pediatrician was like, "So how are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm fine." And then I burst out in tears because I was so upset because she would latch on one side, but then the other side I was just starting to get frustrated because she wasn't latching, and I was like, she's not eating enough, and I don't know what I'm doing, and it was very overwhelming.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, that's weird how the one side was. Did you ever figure out what the issue was?
I don't think so. So, honestly, in my opinion, I kind of think, I asked the consultant about it. I kind of forget what she said, but I feel like the nipple on that side, it's not out as much as the other side. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, inverted
Yeah.
or flat. Yeah.
So, in my opinion, I feel like that was what it was, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so common to have a difference between the two. A lot of people I talk to, the baby has a favorite side for sure, and it's almost like you just have to use the non-favorite side sometimes just to sort of keep it in commission, but like, the we will primarily nurse on the one side. It's so interesting how it works out. For me too, I think like being right-handed or left-handed, sometimes it's just like easy to get a good hold on one side.
I do agree with that. It was definitely more awkward on that side for me too.
Where'd you go from there? So you brought us up to like baby's a few days old and you burst out into tears in the pediatrician.
So the pediatrician at that point, she told me to keep going on the one side, get her to eat as much as I could on that side. And then she told me to pump the other side and just supplement with formula, whatever extra that she needed. And then I want to say I kept trying for at least another week or so. And honestly, between like being alone, figuring out a newborn, trying to breastfeed, trying to go through PA school, like I just couldn't I felt like I was trying to do everything and I couldn't do it all by myself. So at that point is when I decided to start just pumping exclusively, because I like still really wanted to try and get the breast milk. And I had one of my OB-GYNs actually, she was telling me about how one of her friends had pumped exclusively for 6 months. So I was like, all right, this might be easier for me to figure everything out with. So I researched a lot about exclusively pumping, and they really recommended like staying on it for a continuous schedule. So I think I started doing it like every 3 hours, and I did it for, I want to say like 15 to 20 minutes total. And the pump that I have, I could do both sides at once. So that was super helpful. After, the 20 minutes was up, and then I would put them in bags and put them in the fridge. I would keep like a supply of, I want to say 3 bottles of like milk ready for her, because at that time it was like, we weren't feeding her on a schedule. It was kind of just like feed her every 3 hours, or like if she needed it sooner, we feed her. So I wanted that supply available in the fridge. And then once I started getting a routine in place, and of course I was starting to produce more because I was pumping so much and so regularly, then I was able to start putting it in bags and putting them in the freezer and saving them for future use.
That's a nice feeling when you start to make a stash.
And Kaylin got like overwhelmed, and we actually had to go out and buy a freezer, which is extremely difficult in the middle of a pandemic, because apparently everybody buys a freezer in a pandemic.
You're so right. That was in the like hoarding the toilet paper, hoarding the meat. So like people were buying freezers for their meat. I did not even think about that.
So we eventually found a freezer because our freezer was full. We had bags of breast milk at my mom's house, my neighbor's house, my grandpa's house. Like all the breast milk was everywhere.
That's pretty funny when you say it like that.
We were literally calling people like, hey, can you take a grocery bag of breast milk?
Oh my gosh. That's great that it takes a village to store all the breast milk, I guess.
My original goal, even like from before she was born, was to try and breastfeed or give her breast milk until she was 6 months old. And so I found an app that I used, and I would hit the timer when I started pumping, stop the timer when I stopped pumping, and then I would log how much I got out of each side. And then I could also log what I put in the freezer. And it calculated for me how much milk I needed in the freezer to make it to my goal of 6 months. So I could have kept pumping longer if I wanted to, but I think like, pumping every 3 hours every day, all day is like, it gets to the point of being too, like, it's the same as breastfeeding, I'm sure, like it's time consuming. But so I decided to stop, and weaning off was definitely a lot harder than I anticipated, and took a lot longer than I anticipated. But I think eventually, whenever I finished, I think I finished maybe in like early August, I want to say, and I had enough milk pretty much it was a week before her 7th month birthday is when we ran out. So that was super exciting for me.
Wow. So I guess we could say you're a
Yeah.
planner because you had your goal and you had your app and you made sure you exceeded your
hmm
goal. And that is so cool. It's cool for you to like break down the logistics of how it worked out. You were like waking up in the middle of the night even to
I
pump?
was in the beginning. And like, that's kind of the problem, with breastfeeding is that your spouse can't help. So like I would stay up and give her her last feeding at whatever it was, like midnight. And then I would go to bed and he would get up at 3 a.m. and give her the bottle, but I would still get up at 3 a.m. and pump. But at some point, like he made the comment, he's like, why don't you just try and get the sleep? Because you need sleep. And I started going from like midnight until 7 a.m. But you better believe by 7 a.m. my boobs were hurting so bad. It was like a rush to the pump in the morning.
No, I understand because like if you're breastfeeding in the middle of the night and then the baby starts skipping a
Uh-huh.
feeding, and all of a sudden like you wake up and you look at the clock and you're like, what happened? It's been 6 or 7 hours, and you like are
Oh,
leaking
yeah.
everywhere and you're really engorged, and you're like, I need to feed someone. I need to pump someone.
I don't know. I'm curious, like, when you were breastfeeding, like, did you wear a bra the entire, like, 100% of the time?
Yeah, I think I learned the hard way the first
Mhm.
time. And then from there on, I would always have a nursing tank or nursing bra on, and I would always have those like pads
Mhm.
inside because I could leak at a moment's
Yeah.
notice.
That was the same for me. I had to wear a bra at all times. And honestly, like, when I eventually stopped pumping and, like, was able to take the bra off, I'm like, this is the best feeling in the world.
Yes, and you can like wear whatever clothes you
Yeah.
want. You don't have to worry about easy access or
Mhm.
anything.
And I didn't want to buy nursing bras, so I made my own like makeshift ones out of sports bras and I just like cut slits and I essentially was trying to make it hands-free pumping. It worked. It definitely worked.
That's great. I've seen something. It's like a hair tie holding the flanges
Mm,
on, or did you have any of that
I
going on?
didn't, but I felt like Regina George from Mean Girls. Where she, like if you can imagine that scene where she has it cut out, that's what I felt
Yes, that's a really good comparison there. No, doing the two at once is obviously
like. Oh
way
yeah.
more efficient. That always that bothered me, like the feeling of two at once. I always thought like I wouldn't want to have to nurse
Mhm.
twins like two at the same time. But yeah, obviously it's way more efficient to
Yeah.
just do it that way. Yeah, no, I'm really impressed. I love again like that you did the research and you're like, this is the best solution for us, and it makes total sense that then you could share the feeding responsibilities because you're right. Even though you still had 100% of the pumping responsibilities, otherwise, like you are it
Mhm.
for food. Like there's no option. So at least you gave yourself some
Yep.
options. I just kept thinking about everybody having babies during this time. And I was like, this is the worst time. And especially at the beginning, like we didn't know
Mhm.
anything. Like we didn't know if babies were susceptible or, like what the actual risks were. So, I mean, obviously you were just playing it totally safe, which makes
Mhm.
sense. Like now I think people would be a little more informed. Like you'd be able to take maybe like you might make a different decision today just because we know a
Oh,
little
for
bit
sure.
more.
And I like I said, she had jaundice when she was born. So we were going to the office every day and like every day I'd have anxiety going because like masks weren't something in the beginning. So like we're walking into this office and I'm like panicking that she's being exposed to COVID and she's like 2 days old and it was so nerve wracking. But I had to do it.
Or it's easy to forget what it was like in the very beginning and just how much was
Mhm.
unknown. And in normal circumstances, you hate to take your newborn out to get exposed to
Right.
germs. And this was like, times
Yeah.
1,000. So
It's so crazy. Like I had I had decided to be induced. It's new research showing that first time moms, healthy, they recommend induction at 39 weeks. And I like waited to the last minute to decide I like didn't want to do it at all. if I'm being honest, I probably made the decision more based off of school, which I wish I didn't for that reason. But now, like, retrospect, I'm glad I did because of COVID. That was an extremely hard decision. And again, I'm glad because if I had to have my baby, like, when COVID was up and ramping really, and my husband couldn't have been there, my family couldn't have been there, that would have sucked.
Yeah, yeah, right. There's a time there where I feel like husbands were dropping wives
Yeah.
off to deliver. Like, I don't know if they were allowed to come in
Yeah,
or
I
not.
think didn't you have like some kind of I thought I saw you post something about like they weren't allowing midwives in or
Doulas, yeah. So, like, for 9 months, you have this plan. It's going to be your partner and your doula are going to be in there with you. That's how you've prepared for your birth. And then all of a sudden, last minute, the hospital's like, nope, can't have your support person. And for a while, it was like just a really gray area. Like, hospitals could make their own policy. And it was like changing on an hourly, if not daily basis. Yeah. So I was trying to help someone get like the most current information. And I just couldn't imagine. And my whole thing was like, no, guys, okay, we need to prioritize the moms and the babies right now. Like, we need one extra person in the delivery room. If research shows that this is the best way to have a healthy outcome is to have mom follow her birth plan, have her doula there. So I was pretty mad about that one. I was like, we can cut our risks in every other sector of the economy, but we need birth to go as planned.
Totally agree.
Well, your baby's super cute.
Thank you. I just pulled up my stats from my pumping app. So I pumped 45.8 gallons and I spent a 9 days, 3 hours and 5 minutes pumping total.
Oh my gosh. That is so much milk.
It's so crazy.
That's awesome. What app did you use?
It's called Pump Log.
Yeah, there's like all these apps I've never heard of. There's one that like you put in when the baby woke up and it suggests like when the next nap time should be and things like that. I was like, well, that's a good idea.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm part of the itty bitty titty committee, so I still find it like incredible that I could produce that much milk, and how much like money we do cloth diapers too. So like now I'm starting to buy formula now and I'm like, oh my God, we save so much money. I can't believe how fast you go through formula.
I know it's a big savings that is. And it is interesting because, women with large breasts, like just common sense, you would think like, oh, they could produce more milk or they have more milk or they'd be more full. And it has like nothing to do with that.
It's super crazy. And honestly, this may be TMI, but like when I'm in the shower sometimes, like I just kind of see like, is it still there? And I can still express something out. So I'm like, could I start pumping again if I wanted to? I don't know.
It's a good question. I think I remember that happening too. Like you think you're totally done and you're not. I've read women like years after even can still get a little milk. So it's interesting. And then there are drugs you can take to relactate if you want, or like if you adopt a baby and you lactate. So I'm just learning about that. I think that's so cool. But did you experience any hormonal issues when you did wean? Like you said it took a little bit longer than you thought, but what was that experience like?
I don't think hormonal issues. I don't think I had that. But I guess my expectation was that I would just like cut down on time I was pumping or drop a pump. I just thought like I would be done in a week. I would cut down in a week and like that was not real because like one, I couldn't wait as long between pumps as I had intended. And so, I would just get so painful that I'd have to go pump. So me spacing out time between pumps was more difficult. And like, I still had to pump I was doing it for 20 minutes, but I still had to pump for at least 15 minutes or I'm still in pain. And I didn't feel like I would get it all out. So I had to keep researching that. And Roxanne, actually, she gave me mint oil, peppermint oil to that you can rub on, and I think that definitely helped. It like kicked it into high gear, but it kind of halted at a point where I just had to suck it up and feel some pain to get longer spacing out.
But then you are worried about like a
Yeah.
clogged duct or mastitis.
Yep,
or
I was
something.
definitely worried about that. Did you get mastitis at all?
I did several times. The first time was with Nolan. I was like, probably only like 5 days to a week postpartum. Like he was pretty young. And all of a sudden I got this like super high fever and I had chills and I was in pain. And I was like FaceTiming with the midwife, showing her my breasts on my iPad so she could diagnose me over the iPad and prescribe me some antibiotics without me having to come in with my like 5-day-old baby. And I think she did. And then the next time I got it, whoever my midwife was, said, if you can just sort of work it out yourself, like feed the baby more often, like try to empty all those things, like you don't have to take antibiotics. I was like, oh, okay. So that I was able to resolve it on my own, but both times
is
were
there a
painful.
way to prevent it, or is there something specific causing it?
I think in my case, I had like a cracked nipple. And so like bacteria probably got in there was part of the issue. And then, but I know it's like if you have a clogged duct, that can turn into mastitis because I don't know if bacteria is just like hanging out in one spot. I'm kind of confused about the mechanics of it, but definitely emptying fully is one way to prevent it. And I wasn't always. It was like, okay, the baby didn't, especially in the middle of the night. It's like, no, I don't. Okay, baby's tired. I'm tired. Like we're done. And I didn't always faithfully empty, so I paid the price.
You just reminded me of something. When I was in the hospital, right after I had her and the breast consultant came in to see us, that my one bad side that she wasn't latching on, I don't remember what she said it looked like, if it was cracked or whatever, but she gave me this like special, I had to get it from the pharmacy that they like made special and you couldn't buy it in store or anything, for me to like put as a nipple cream.
Jack Newman's all-purpose nipple cream.
Is that what they formulate in the?
Yeah, it's compounded. It's literally like hydrocortisone, some sort of yeast. It's like what you would take for a yeast infection, and hydrocortisone and bacitracin or something like that. It's like 3 things you could walk into CVS and grab and mix yourself. Or the pharmacy. Yes, no, that is like the best thing ever. I use that for thrush. I use that for mastitis. I use it just to keep it like moist and not crack.
Honestly, yeah, I kind of like freaked. I don't want to say freaked out, but like when she said she recommended me, I kind of like, I guess felt discouraged or like nervous that I was going to get mastitis because like it was one day and I was already having nipple problems,
Yeah. No, and it sounds like they didn't offer you a nipple shield. That's one, like I had to use that with Max, where it draws the nipple out, but the baby doesn't get quite as much milk. Like you don't get as good of a.
So you keep it on?
You keep it on, but like, so I had to use it for a week or whatever. And eventually you don't have to anymore because your nipples like learn how to come out themselves. And lactation consultants are like, they're like on the fence because like it makes it not as efficient of a feeding, but like if it's going to prevent you from getting cracked nipples and not being able to feed at all, like it's probably better. So I'm glad they offered it to me. I would be mad in hindsight if they just never even told me that was an option, because I feel like that helped me get through the first week with like having flat nipples.
Do you feel like, so I guess I've heard that if you're doing it right, it shouldn't hurt. Would you say that's true?
I feel like I haven't talked to anyone who said it didn't hurt. So maybe like in cultures where you like grow up with your mom and your aunt breastfeeding in front of you and like they help you, like you have like 24-hour support, maybe. But I just feel like things are so tender and like you and the baby are both just figuring out the right position. It just seems like everyone I talked to, at least for some amount of time, was like, yeah, it hurt.
So you feel, and even like every baby, like each time when you first start, it would hurt.
Yeah, it's weird because if you nurse your baby till they're a little bit older, your most recent memory is like, nursing a 6-month-old or a 9-month-old or whatever, who has the hang of things. And then when you have your next newborn, you're like, oh, we got to start from
Yeah.
scratch. And like, it's everything I learned before. Like, no, that's not true. It's a little bit easier, but every baby's different. And like, it's very possible to, go through some
So
struggles
what
again.
happens when they start getting teeth?
I remember asking my aunt that. To be honest, I think I've only been bitten a handful of times, with 3 kids. So they, it's more like they're using their gum or their lips. So unless they're intentionally biting you, their actual latch doesn't really involve
Okay.
the teeth. Like their tongue is in
Yeah.
between you, I think. But it's a scary proposition, and the time that they do bite, it definitely hurts. Yeah, but then the other thing is their little nails. I mean, they can like, claw you.
Eleanor loves touching my face right now, and especially if I don't clip those nails, it's brutal.
With Lucas, I clipped his nail too short one time. Like he was teeny tiny, and I already hate clipping their nails because it's so easy to like cut them. And I nicked his little finger and it was bleeding. And like in hindsight, I'm saying this out loud, I nicked his finger and it was bleeding. He wasn't going to bleed to death. But in my, mom of an infant mind, I was like, he's going to bleed to death. I like called the pediatrician. I'm like, it's been bleeding for 20 minutes. I'm holding a Kleenex on it. It's not stopping. I called Andrea to come over because I was so upset. I had to have 4 hands so I could like get a little Band-Aid on his finger. I couldn't do it by myself. Again, it's the finger. He's not going to bleed to death. But I was convinced that like he was going to bleed out from a nail clipper injury. I was just convinced.
I get it. We have irrational thoughts.
Well, this was really interesting hearing your story, and I do think it's great to hear, like I said, the logistics of exclusive pumping because it is an option. Like there doesn't have to be a all or nothing, or I feel like some people find a solution where it's like half pumping, half nursing, half formula. So it's cool just to know that there's options, and basically like you set your goal. You found a way to achieve it, and in the middle of a pandemic, nonetheless.
I honestly, if I wasn't in school, I'd probably go longer. I think I could definitely go longer, and you can, like, you don't have to go every 3 hours, that was just my way of getting the biggest supply that I could, as much as I could, and you could space it out more, pump less, and it all depends. I think it's different for everybody to get the supply that they need. But like my sister, she tried breastfeeding and then stopped. And now that she saw me and that I did pumping all this time, now she's like, oh, I didn't really realize that was an option. So I don't think everybody really knows that option.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's all supply and demand. So if you're demanding the milk one way or the other, your body's going to keep supplying it. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me about this.
I was just going to say, I think future babies that I'd like to try breastfeeding again. So I'm glad that you're doing this, and I'm excited to hear everybody's stories.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm working on a course too in a similar vein, just like helping people set realistic expectations, communicate the spectrum of there's like, all formula on the one end of the spectrum. And then there's like, exclusive breastfeeding until they're 5 on the other end of the spectrum. And then there's like lots and lots of choices in between. And just to sort of know that whatever choice ends up being best for your family is going to be, the best for you. And like, no judgment, no guilt. Because we all, no matter what, every single person I talk to, it's like, oh, and then I felt guilty that, I had the second baby and I had to stop nursing the first baby. Or like, I felt guilty because I went back to work and I had to, supplement with formula. Like everyone is guilty about whatever they chose to do.
I definitely agree with that.
I don't know where it comes from, but maybe if we could reverse that trend for the next generation of moms, that would be good.
I had a girl that had a baby probably 2 weeks after me, and she kind of messaged me about breastfeeding, how she was struggling with it. And from our little group of friends, I learned, like, you just got to tell them, whatever is best for you and your family, you do what's right for you. Whether it's formula, whether it's breast milk, no judgment.
I really enjoyed my conversation with Stacie, and I hope you did too. I appreciate how she opened up and really walked us through the realities of her journey, all the way from not being able to buy a chest freezer when she needed to making some DIY nursing bras, and then to the weaning process and how it took longer than she had expected. I think this was a really helpful look into the logistics of exclusive pumping and how it might be a good solution depending on your circumstances and your goals. I will post the link to the Pump Log app that Stacie used in our show notes if that's of interest to you. And thanks again for tuning in. I will talk to you soon. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, please send an email to spillingthemilkpodcast@gmail.com.